Thank you, Austin. Thank you guys so much for allowing me to be here, although I'm not sure you had a choice, right? But I feel like you've accepted me. I'm looking around already and seeing what a great group of people I'm with. Having little conversations. I want to have a lot more before I leave here. I want to know a little bit more about you and the journey that you're on. But the thing that I'm hearing consistently is how you're thinking about being Christ to the community in which you live. I keep hearing that resonate, and I guess that's the starting point for me. I am a Nazarene. I'm an Australian. I was born in Australia, raised in Australia. I pastored for a little bit, 6.5 years in Dallas, Texas, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But I'm an Aussie. And I like to come and talk about the mission in Australia, and I have a presentation where I have all the photographs of koalas that people might like to see. I have photographs of flying foxes, because we see flying foxes more than we see koalas. If you don't know what a flying fox is, it's just a very, very big bat, and we see lots of those, and they swirl around in the sky and make a big mess. But so I could show you all those. I could tell you the statistics. So there's about 30. I don't really keep that good a count. I have other people that keep count. Around 30 churches in Australia, about the same in New Zealand. And I do have a responsibility for framing how we go about being the Church of the Nazarene in Australia and New Zealand. And we have constructed a framework to think about our mission. And I see some of that reflected in your conversation. We have called it embedded incarnational mission. And people ask me, why did you use such complicated words? And I say, well, then you have to ask me and I get to tell you what it means. But embedded incarnational mission means that we live in our communities, but we don't see our community as the project of bringing them into the church. The community is not our project. The community is our context, and we love these people. These are our people. We live in this community. This is our people. We're proud of our communities. We're proud of our cricket teams and our football teams and whatever else the communities. We're proud of that. We love this space, and in loving this space, we bring Jesus to that space. And that's the framework that's what incarnational means, if you're wondering. Incarnational means living out God, which is what Jesus did, and then that's what we're trying to do, and it's our mission. But there's a dream behind that mission, and it's actually that dream that I want to share with you a little bit, because if what I'm hearing is right, it's the same dream you have. And in actual fact, what binds us together this morning, what makes it easy for you to be in this space, what it makes it easy for you to listen to this person, and you are still trying to work out what I'm saying because of the accent, I understand that. But what makes it easy for us to be there is that we have a dream in the background. So let me unpack that dream a little bit for you. First of all, let me say this. I'm here because of the Church of the Nazarene. I don't mean I'm here because the Church of the Nazarene has a global missions presence, and that global mission presence enables me to be here, although that is true. I mean, I'm here because the Church of the Nazarene made me. And I don't just mean that in the sense that I was saved and sanctified in the Church of the Nazarene. I was. And that did make me. But that's not only what I mean. You see, my mother and father met in Nazarene Bible College. And my dad was a 16-year-old man and boy. And his dad grabbed him by the collar and the shorts and threw him out of the door because he became a Christian in the Church of the Nazarene. And he didn't care where it was just that he was a Christian. That was enough to throw him out. So he went and lived with the pastor for a number of time, and in that context felt a call to mission. And he went to college and he met my mother, and I'm the product of that. So I'm here because the Nazarene Church has literally given me breath. It wouldn't be here without the Church of the Nazarene. But my mother, her mother, had a younger brother who was a serviceman in World War II, and he was stationed in Brisbane, my hometown, and an American serviceman who had been fighting on the front lines in Papua New Guinea. The war is coming to an end and he's returning to America, and he comes through Brisbane on his repatriation journey. And when he gets there, he goes to a Christian bookstore and he says, "Where's the Church of the Nazarene?" They'd never heard of such a thing. And he said, "Well, is there a holiness church in town?" They'd never heard of such a thing. And they said, "But there's a little independent church down the road. They talk about holiness from time to time. Maybe you'll like to go there." Well, all Christians ought to talk about holiness, right? So he went there and he met this young man, and he talked to him about the dream of the Church of the Nazarene. And it was the dream that was so deeply in his heart that as a man that has just come off the front lines in Papua New Guinea, he couldn't stop talking about it. And he talked about that dream until it captured that young man's heart, and he became a member of the Church of the Nazarene, the very first Nazarene in Australia. He was my uncle. Very first Church of the Nazarene in Australia. And so people used to say to him, "Hey, Bertie, how's the Church of the Nazarene doing today?" And he'd say, "Well, fantastic. We were the only church in the entire country of Australia that last week had 100% in attendance," because he's the only one. So he could make that brag. And so that's the heritage from which I come. But I'm a Nazarene today. I mean, I'm a Christian. And the dream of the Church of the Nazarene is not unique. There's many people that have this kind of a dream, but it is our dream. And it's a dream that propels the Church of the Nazarene from the very beginning, even before we began, to come together with a sense of this dream changes the world. And we live in that space, and we reach out and we change. 164 countries. If I understand correctly, John, that's more countries than McDonald's, right? I think that's true. 164 countries that we can talk about, and then there's others besides. That's where the Church of the Nazarene is. And so, but there's this dream in the background. I want to tell you about that dream that resonates in the background, that brings me life, that forms embedded incarnational mission that we share this morning. But in order to get there, I'm going to have to tell you a couple of stories. So we got the chance to leave our home in Australia and come to Dallas, Texas to plant a church. In fact, I wanted a church planting experience where I could guarantee that I could keep feeding my children. And so this opportunity came up, and it was a funded opportunity, so that seemed like a good chance to actually play around with ideas of planting a church. So we moved to Dallas to plant this church. Still going there today, 25 years later. It's a really good group of people. It's in North Dallas, right on the end of North Dallas. And the first summer that we were there, it was hot and it was humid. And it's okay, because that's where I come from. I was born in the subtropics. I've lived most of my life in the subtropics, and John and Vicky will tell you it's hot and humid in that part of the world. So we had no problem with our first summer there, but winter came around, and we never experienced something like this. I'm going to tell you something because it still shocks me to the core of my being, and you won't even get it. But the first winter we were there was 3 days in a row where the maximum temperature was below freezing. 3 days in a row. Can you believe that? Well, yes, you can, I'm sure. But I had never experienced anything like that. That was amazing to me. 3 days in a row, maximum temperature. I'd never been where I live. Go a little further west. Sometimes it gets down to freezing, but where I live, it's never got to freezing and recorded. Well, I think there might have been one time back in the 1920s where it got down to 33 degrees. So that was a cold winter. So we're in this winter, right? And I go out to the backyard, and the dog's water bowl, which was full a few days ago, is now frozen solid. I'd never seen anything like that. The water bowl outside had frozen solid. So I called the family out. I said, "Come on out here. Come and see the water bowl." So we're standing there paying homage to the frozen water bowl with our arms around each other. So, what a good God we serve. Can do these things. What an amazing thing. The temperature so cold enough to get all of your Christmas stuff and keep it in the garage. And it doesn't go off. It's sitting there and everything's fine. Couldn't believe that. But now you guys know this, that one of the wonders of living in that kind of an environment is you get to light a fire inside your house. Now, man, you guys have been doing it all your life, but isn't that the greatest thing you do? Just light a fire inside your house. Light a fire, right? It's just amazing. You get to put the fire, and so wow, how good is this? So I'm lighting the fire. Do the fire thing. There's a downside to that. As you know, you have to clean out the fireplace, right? Every couple of days you've got to clean out. That's the downside. So I'm about to tell you something about myself that explains why I'm telling you this story. I'm messed up. I'm a messed up human being. I have I have many dysfunctions. I have lots of stuff that goes wrong with me, but I have two dysfunctions that fly at each other like two trains on a railway track heading towards each other on the same track. When they meet, there's a thing that happens. So my first dysfunction is this. I hate to feel incompetent. I hate being in a space where people might think that I don't know what I'm doing, or I can't do what I'm supposed to do. That bothers me deeply. So if I go to a shopping mall, my imagination says to me, everybody here knows where to go. I'm the only person that don't know where to go. So if I ask anybody, they'll know I'm incompetent and I can't do it. So I've got to find the little map, work out exactly where to go, and go straight to that store without looking right or left, because I don't want people to know that I don't know where I'm going. That's a dysfunction. That's about hiding away how I actually feel about myself. And some of you people here are going, that's kind of dumb. That we start off not knowing anything. We have to ask questions. Other users are saying, I know exactly what you're talking about. So I feel good when I'm with those people, because we can share that feeling, right? Afraid of people finding out you don't know how to do something. But my other dysfunction that is the other train is this. I like to do things differently to other people. If other people have been doing something one way, I like to find another way to do it and call it better. So you can see how those two things can come together, right? So I'm cleaning out the fireplace, and I think to myself, there's got to be a better way of doing this. This is the metal brush and the shovel. This is tedious. I hate tedious too, by the way, but that's a whole other story. And so I'm gonna find a better way. I've thought of it. A better way to do this. I'm gonna vacuum up this fireplace. So you know, when you go camping and you light a fire out there in the scrub or the whatever you are, and you go to bed in the tent, and you get up in the morning, and there's not a lot you have to do to get that fire going. You get a few twigs and that around, and then you blow on the coals, right? And if you blow hard enough, long enough, the coals come back to life, and it lights that fire beautifully. Yeah, well, apparently the same thing happens if you suck. So I'm sucking. And while I'm sucking, I'm seeing red coals going up the tube. And I think to myself, because I'm not stupid, I think to myself, that can't be good. So I race over and I pull the plug out of the wall, and I race back to the vacuum, and I open it up, and there's smoke coming out of the bag in the back. So I can't remember exactly how I handled it. I think I went and got a big pot, and I pulled the bag out, stuck it in the pot. There's mess going everywhere, but I race it out, and I dump it into the trash bin out the back. I stick it in there, and I come back inside, and I put a new bag in, clean up all the mess, and I've got away with it. No one will know that I was actually incompetent. That'll go in the trash truck, and it'll go to the dump, and no one will ever know how dumb I really am. Got away with it. No one will know that because you couldn't never have people know that you're incompetent. About 15 minutes later, my wife comes home, and she said, do you know our trash bin's on fire? And I run out the back, and here's our trash bin. It's melting. And here there's smoke coming out like that. So I think to myself, there's a hole in it, and the smoke's actually coming out the bottom. And I think to myself, well, this can't be good. So I run inside, and I grab a pitcher of water, well, that's in my mind, I'm going to run inside, grab a pitcher of water, and I'll just start putting it out, because what else would you do? And so I get inside, and my wife's calling the fire brigade. My goodness. So I cannot have official people know how incompetent I am. That's the height of shame. And so I run over and I hit the button on the phone. Bang! And the beauty of the emergency call system is, if you call them, they know where you are. So about 15 minutes later, I don't know how long, but it was not long. These engine, this siren, whoa, whoa, and there's these two fire trucks coming down our road, and they're stopping right out the front of our place, and every neighbor in the neighborhood is looking out their windows wondering what's going on. Who is the idiot that started a fire in there? Who is the incompetent that started the fire, right? And so the firemen get there, and they've got their masks on their face and their axes in their hand, and they're ready for battle. As I reflect back on that story, I bet it wasn't like that, but that's how I picture it in my mind. And they come, they kick the door down. They probably just opened the door, but all of those things got imagined in my mind, that this is because of how I'm feeling about myself in that space, right? It's all over the top drama, and they come running into the house, 30 or 40 of them, and they come out the backyard, and they get the trash bin, and they pick it up, and they dump all the trash on the back on the driveway, and they spread it all out, and they've got one of these things with a metal handle and a metal plate, and they're just stamping on all the trash to make sure it's all out. And I'm looking around, and there's faces at every window in the neighborhood, and I'm going, and so then they're done. They've got the fire out, and they're leaving, and I say to them, "Who's going to clean up this mess?" They didn't say a thing. So I got the message. I heard their silence. Now, the reason I tell you that story is because that's who I am as a human being. Those are the things that are, some of the things that are wrong with me. I'm screwed up, right? Why are those things wrong with me? Well, the truth is, at the very deep part of my being, where I am me, I actually believe I'm not good enough. Right in the core of my being, I believe I'm worthless. And I've spent my life building mechanisms that would make sure that nobody else sees that reality. That nobody else knows that right down in the core of my being, I've got question marks about who I am. The good part, and I'll get to there and then come back, is that Jesus has helped me with that, right? And that's why we're here this morning. But that when I was a young pastor, and John Moore was then and still is my mentor, and he used to have talks with me and help me to understand the world and church in a better way. And we'd talk about stuff. He'd help me to see things in a better way. But as a young pastor, I felt miserable. I felt like I can't do this. I'm not good enough. And I began to think about that process, and I began to read and to think about that. And what I discovered was that every one of us has felt like that at some point in our life. And particularly if we've had trauma in our life and struggles in our life, and we've all learned ways of coping that, and our being part of the Christian community can many times help us with that, but often not. Often we hide that away. We keep it hidden from the other folks that we journey with, because if they knew how I really felt about myself, they wouldn't want to hang out with me, because they would know what a worthless person I am, and I can't have that. So I hide it, and I keep it hidden. It's not an idea in my head. It gets there, but that's not what it is. It's a deep-centered understanding of who I am. It's right in my very being. It's in my inner self. It's right at the place of what we might psychologically call my identity, how I know who I am. And you know where that came from? Do you know why I feel that? Do you know why you feel that? Well, if you go right back to the very beginning in Genesis and read that story in Genesis, you will come down to the end of the second chapter of Genesis, and it will say they were naked and they had no shame. When I first read that, lots of times I read that, and it didn't make any sense to me, because here you've got these two extraordinarily beautiful people, perhaps the most beautiful people that have ever lived, and they are married to each other, and they love each other, and there's nobody else around. So why would nakedness be a problem? Well, the writer of that story had a very, very important reason for saying that, because in the Jewish mind, in the Hebrew mind, nakedness was a shameful state. If you're naked, that's your shame exposed. And you can see that in the Scriptures. You'll see that come out through the Scriptures. So when the writer says they were naked and they had no shame, that stands out like a beacon to the people that are reading that, because they're saying there was a place in time for humanity where the most shameful picture didn't bring them shame. And as soon as they sinned, they immediately recognized shame. In fact, the temptation was that you are not loved as much as you think you are loved. That's the temptation. That you are not, because if God loved you as much as what He says He'd love you, He would make you equal with Him, and you're not equal with Him, you're less than Him. And so the first thought of lessness came in, and they acted out of that thought of lessness, and they immediately became shame. How do we know that? Because they hid themselves, right? They made excuses. They blamed each other, and all of those activities are understood today psychologically as what shame does to us. Shame is something that the whole human species deals with, and I would suggest, and I have suggested, the reason the whole human species deals with that is because you and I were designed to have a relationship with God. That's what we were born to have, but we didn't have it the way that it was intended to be. And so in that space of absence of relationship, we formed a picture of ourselves, and that picture of ourselves is shaped by that shame. And it buries deep in our lives, and we've brought that with us today. It's the way we understand ourselves. Now, praise Jesus, there is a way of responding to that, and I want to very quickly share that with you. In Ephesians chapter 3, if you want to open a scripture together, or I don't know if we can get it up on the screen, but Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 14, Paul writes this. He says, Ephesians 3:14, "For this reason I bow my knees before the Father." The reason is that in the previous section he had said God has made a way to him through Jesus Christ. It used to be a secret. It's not a secret anymore. That's the way we get to God. So for this reason, I bow my knees before the Father in heaven, from whom every family in heaven on earth derives its name. So right off, we can see that Paul is writing to the issue of identity, because Paul says God is the one that tells us who we are. In our brokenness, we believe that it's the way we've been loved or not loved that tells us who we are. It's our tragedies, it's our fears, it's our failures that tell us who we are. It's our hopes and dreams to fix that feeling that tells us who we are. But Paul is saying everybody, it doesn't matter what race or faith or intellect or socioeconomic activity, everybody on the earth actually derives their name from the Father. So who we really are is who God tells us we are. And then he says, my prayer is that he would grant you according to the riches of his glory. According to the riches of his glory, I pray that he would grant to you that you would be strengthened through his Spirit in your inner self. See that? It's right there in Scriptures. In your inner being, in the place where you are really you, I would pray that out of his glorious riches, he would strengthen you. I want to give you a truth this morning that I have found to be the most important truth that I have ever embraced. And it's something that everybody in this room knows, but we may not have thought about it. And this is the truth. And if you get nothing else out of today, take this truth home with you and live with it for a while. Love and worth are the same thing for us. Love and worth are the same thing. So think about it. When you tell somebody you love them, you have got to find a way of causing them to feel valuable in order for them to know that you are loved. So, gentlemen, sometime you brought your wife flowers, right? And you're saying, I love you. Your wife is saying, you value me. I'm important to you. So I know that I love you. For a year, every single day, I stopped at a store and bought my wife a single stem rose. And it was at a time when we were struggling in our marriage. And so every day, I stopped at a store and bought a single stem rose and brought it home to her. And I said nothing, I just gave it to her. Because I wanted to say, I value you. So when you love someone, until you've told them that you value them, they do not know that you love them. But you know that, right? Because when people have told you they love you, but they've treated you like you're rubbish, you didn't feel loved. When people have told you they loved you, but they found a way of valuing you, including you, embracing you, journeying with you, sharing life with you, said you're valuable to me, then you felt love. And so Paul says, out of the glorious riches, out of his glorious riches. So he immediately goes to that space of value. What are glorious riches? Valuable. So he goes to that space of value and say, out of God's inestimable worth, out of his incredible value, that's the place that I pray that he strengthens you in your inner being. So in your inner being is a reflection of the glorious riches of heaven, right? And so we easily go to the place of saying, I'm not worthy of your love. Well, let me just tell you this. We have done nothing in our lives that makes us worthy of his love. But we are worthy of his love because he loves us. And he knows, and as John says, he knows everything. So your worth is not because of what you've done, of which we've done nothing, but you have value beyond what you can imagine, and it's because you don't imagine it that we say stay stuck in that place. But it's not because of what you've done. It's because of what he says about you. It's what he says to you. What does he say? I love you so much, I'll die for you. God does not value his own life more than he values you. So we can't stay stuck in that place where we say, I'm not worthy. We are not worthy of from what we've done, but I am worthy because of what he says. And he says, I'm incredibly valuable. And Paul is saying, I just pray that you get this, that you get it. That's my prayer, that you would know who you are. And because you know who you are, he would strengthen you in your inner being. And that in that place you would know how much you are loved. And he would strengthen you so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. The dwelling idea is belonging to each other. And in that phrase, in the context in which it's written, people dwell together because they love each other and they value each other. And their greatest sense of identity comes from the people they live with. And Paul is saying that he would live in your heart. So that Christ may dwell in your heart through faith, and that you, being rooted and grounded in love, that you would be rooted and grounded in love, that your identity, and that's what he's talking about, that your identity would be found in love, that you would know yourself in love. And then he says that you may be able to comprehend with all the saints, so anyone that knows Jesus has the same privilege, that you may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the width and the length and the height and the depth of his love. And to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge. Do you see that? That you would know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge. That you would know that which cannot be known. That you would know the love of Christ that can't be known. Why can't it be known? Because we are so stuck in our own sense of who we are that it will take a miracle of God's grace for us to see who we really are. And we believe in that. We believe in that. We're peeling back on the dream. We believe that we can in this life, here and now, know how we are valuable to Him. And I want to say this. So love and worth are the same thing for us practically. That's the greatest truth. To understand, in terms of understanding how to build our life. Love and worth. The other thing is this. Your greatest challenge as you follow Jesus, and I'm absolutely serious about this, so please pause for a moment and get it. Your greatest challenge in following Jesus is not the discipline. It's not to make sure you read the Bible for an hour each day and pray for another hour each day. That's not your biggest challenge. Your biggest challenge is not to tithe. That's not your biggest challenge. Your biggest challenge is not to come to church every week. It's not to go to small groups. That's not the biggest challenge. All of those things are fine. They're all wonderful. That's fine. But those are not the challenge. Your biggest challenge will not be to say, I'm going to be a missionary, I'm going to go to Australia. That's not the biggest challenge. That would be easy. But it's not, the biggest challenge is not to say, I'll do whatever you ask of me, Jesus. That's a pretty big challenge. It's not the biggest challenge. You know what your biggest challenge is? You ready for it? That you would know that God loves you. That's your biggest challenge. That you would know in the depth of your being, in the core of who you are, where you are the person that you know, that you would know that He loves you there. And most of us will spend our lives knowing what can be known, that God loves us, and we'll minister out of that space. But it's only when you know what can't be known that He loves you at the very core of your being, and you throw open the gates of your heart and you receive love in that place where you abandon everything else that you've used to define your sense of who you are, your career, your family, your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your failures, your tragedies. When you say all of those things, as much as they do speak to me about who I am, are, as Paul said, rubbish compared to the surpassing knowledge of that He loves me. We have a phrase in the Church of the Nazarene tradition to describe that moment where we say, He loves me. We call it entire sanctification. There's a whole theology built around the idea of entire sanctification. But if you've ever wondered what we're actually talking about when we say that, we're talking about the moment in time where before the Father we abandon everything that has defined us, good or bad, and we say, from this moment forward, you will define me. I will be yours, not just to do your will, but to be your will. And so then he says, and to know the love of Christ which surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled up with the fullness of God. That you may be filled up with the fullness of God. If I was the apostle and I was writing this epistle, and I was trying to think of grand things I could say about the love of God, maybe I might dare to say this, that you would be filled up to all you could stand. That you would be filled up with all that you can hold of the love of God. That the love of God would fill every part of your being. Maybe I'd dare to say that. But Paul didn't say that because that wasn't big enough for him. He said that you would be filled up to the fullness of God. That God would define the capacity of His love at work in your life. Not you, not your failures, not your fears, not your hopes, not your dreams, but God would fill you to the fullness of His love. This is the most incomprehensible passage. That's why Paul said it can't be known, but that you would know that which can't be known. Filled up to the fullness of God. And then he says, because Paul's probably right by this stage that I'm not sure they're going to believe me when I say that. He says, now unto Him that is abundantly able to do far more than we can ask or think. If you can imagine what it is to be filled up with the fullness of God, God can do more. To him be the glory in Christ Jesus to all generations, forever and ever, down to Sutter's Creek in March of 2024. Did you know that you guys are in the scriptures right there? Did you know that? You're right there. I mean, I'm reading between the lines. But you're there, right there. Through all generations, forever and ever, would know this incredible, wonderful truth that God's love could fill us to the fullness of his being. That love will so get a hold of our lives, it will define everything we do. We don't do what we do because there's a rule in a book. We do what we do because love fills our hearts, and what else could we do? And so we go with hand in hand with God, who tells us who we really are, and we live in that space. And over 100 years ago, a group of people started feeling that so powerfully. They said, we ought to be together. We ought to be together and believe this together. And they formed the Church of the Nazarene. And immediately the Church of the Nazarene went out around the world with a dream. Our dream was not to populate the Church of the Nazarene. Our dream was not to build an institution. Our dream was not to have general superintendents, as wonderful as they are. Our dream was not. That wasn't our dream. Our dream was that love would change the world. And that dream has touched me. And that dream has touched you. Can we dream that dream together?